My best friends from high school had a chat without me where they talked about my life. I found out because one of them sent me a screenshot by mistake. What happened when I confronted them was the most uncomfortable thing of 11 years of friendship. There are moments where your phone does something and you read it, and for the first few seconds you do not completely understand what you are looking at. Where the information is there, but your brain takes a little longer than usual to process it because what you are seeing does not correspond to any expectation you had. The screenshot arrived on a Thursday at 2 in the afternoon. It was from Andrea. Andrea is one of my 5 friends in the group. The message said attached screenshot and nothing else. The screenshot was of a WhatsApp chat. The name of the chat was Las de Siempre Syndrome. Las de Siempre was the name of our group. Syndrome was a group I did not know existed. And in that screenshot, the 4 of them were there. Talking about me. My name is Sophia. I am 27 years old. I am a UX designer at a digital agency, and I have spent 11 years being part of a group of friends that formed in high school that had survived university, moves, relationships, job changes, and all the versions of the people we had been becoming. The group was 5 of us. Me, Andrea, Valeria, Mariana, and Lucia. We had always had, or so I thought, the kind of friendship where things were said to each other's faces. Where if someone had a problem with something, they told the person. Where transparency was part of the implicit contract of what we were. That was what I thought. Until 2 in the afternoon on Thursday. I read the screenshot twice. The first time to understand what I was looking at. The second time to process what it said. The conversation in the screenshot was from the day before. Valeria had written that she was worried about Sophia's decision to leave her stable job to freelance because she did not think she had the discipline to manage it. Mariana had responded that the discipline was the least of it and that the real problem was Emilio because it was obvious that Sophia made her career decisions to accommodate what he wanted. Lucia had said she partly agreed, but that they also had to understand that Sophia had always needed external validation to make big decisions. Andrea had not responded in that section of the conversation. It had been Andrea who had sent me the screenshot by mistake. I sat with the phone in my hand for a time. I did not cry immediately. The first thing I felt was something closer to vertigo than to pain. The feeling that the floor of something you thought was solid has just shown a crack you did not know was there. Then the pain arrived, and then the anger. Not necessarily in that order. Sometimes simultaneously. I sent Andrea a message that said only, I think this was not meant for me. Andrea did not respond for 40 minutes. When she responded, the message said, Oh, Sophia, I am so sorry. Can we talk? I told her yes. That night, in the hours between Andrea's message and the call that night, I did something that in retrospect, I do not know whether it was good or bad, but that in the moment was the only thing I could do. I kept working, or would try to keep doing it. In between tasks, I reviewed the screenshot several more times. Not to torture myself, to make sure what I remembered reading was what I had read, that I had not misinterpreted the tone, that the comments were what they seemed to be. They were. Andrea called me at 9 that night. It was the first conversation of what was going to be several. She told me she was sorry, that the chat had existed for 6 months, that it had started when Valeria had wanted to talk about something about me without telling me directly and had created the group to discuss it with the others. That afterward it had continued as a space where they talked about things in the group without the person involved. I asked her whether there had been more conversations about me in that chat. She told me yes. I asked about what. She told me about my relationship with Emilio, about my decision to leave my job, about a situation that had happened at a group gathering 2 months ago where I had said something that had bothered Valeria and that Valeria had processed in the chat instead of telling me. I asked her whether at any point anyone had thought about telling me what they thought directly. She took a while. She told me Lucia had suggested it at some point, that the rest had considered it better not to create conflict. I told her that was exactly the problem, that the attempt to avoid creating conflict had created something harder to manage than direct conflict. I decided to have the conversation with all 4 together, not because it was easier, but because what had happened had occurred in a group space, and I wanted the conversation to also happen in that space. We got together Saturday at Mariana's house. I arrived knowing what I knew. They arrived knowing I knew. That symmetry of information at least put everyone at the same starting point. What happened in that 2-hour meeting was the most uncomfortable thing of 11 years of friendship. Not because there was shouting, but because what emerged in that conversation was more complex than I had expected when I had planned it. Valeria was the first to speak directly. She told me she had created the chat because there had been moments where she had things to say about group dynamics that she felt she could not say to me directly because I tended to get defensive when I received criticism. That stopped me, not because it was false, but because it was true in a way I had not expected to hear at that moment and in that way. Mariana said the disciplined thing she had said from a place of genuine concern, that she loved me, that she had not thought about what she said in a private chat reaching me, that if she had known it was going to reach me, she would have said it differently. I told her the problem was not only how she had said it, it was the space where she had said it, that a space where they talked about me without me being present to respond was not a space of genuine concern. It was a tribunal, even if that was not its intention. Lucia was the quietest of the four. At the end, she told me she had been the one who had suggested closing the chat or telling me what they thought directly, that she had not insisted enough when the others had decided it was better not to, that she understood that was also a form of having failed. That mattered. Andrea barely spoke during the meeting. When I asked her directly, she told me she had felt uncomfortable in that chat from the beginning, that she had participated little, that the mistake of sending me the screenshot had not been completely a mistake. That last part was the most unexpected thing of the entire conversation. I asked her what she meant. She told me that somewhere she had wanted me to know, that she had not found a way to tell me about the chat directly, that the accident had resolved the part she had not been able to resolve alone. I made no decisions about the friendships in that meeting. I told them I needed time, that what had happened required more processing than could happen in 2 hours, that what I could tell them in that moment was that the chat had to be closed, that if any of them had something to tell me, they'd tell me directly, that if they had something to tell each other about me, they'd tell me that too, that the parallel space was not an option I could accept. All four said yes. What I processed in the following weeks was more than I had anticipated I would need to process. Not only the chat. What Valeria had said about my tendency to get defensive. Was it true? I reviewed past conversations with that question in mind. The honest answer was probably yes. That there had been moments where I had responded to friends' comments in a way that closed the conversation instead of opening it. That information was uncomfortable. It was also useful in a way it would not have been useful if it had been given to me in that parallel chat. What Mariana had said about Emilio. Was there any truth in that? I reviewed that too, and found that there were decisions I had made in recent months where consideration of what Emilio wanted had weighed more than I would have wanted to admit. That review was the hardest, because it implied that some of the things said in that chat, even though they were said in the wrong place in the wrong way, were not completely false. The friendships continue, with a different dynamic. There are conversations that now happen directly that would not have happened before. There's a discomfort that still exists when we are all together that did not exist before. That with time will probably reduce. Or not. I do not know yet. What I do know is that what resulted from that Saturday conversation was more honest than what had existed before, even though what existed before felt more comfortable. What I wanted to take from this story has two parts. The first is for those who recognize themselves in the position of the four friends. Parallel groups where you talk about someone without that person being present are not spaces of care, even if they feel that way. They're spaces where you build a narrative about that person without their participation, without them being able to correct inaccurate information, without them being able to respond to what is said about them, without them being able to grow from the criticism, because the criticism does not reach them. If you have something to say to someone in your group, say it to that person, even if it is uncomfortable, even if you think they will react badly. The discomfort of direct conversation produces something real. The parallel conversation produces only distance and eventually a screenshot sent to the wrong place. The second part is for those who recognize themselves in Sophia's position. When you discover that people who love you have been talking about you in a space where you could not be, the pain is real and deserves space. And at the same time, the information circulating in that space, even if it arrived the wrong way, may have parts worth reviewing. Separating the container from the content is hard when both hurt. but it may be the most useful thing you do with what you found. If this story resonated with you, comment. Have you ever been in a parallel group where someone you knew was talked about, or have you discovered there was one about you? Like if you believe direct conversation, even when uncomfortable, always produces something more useful than a parallel space, even when it is more comfortable. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who is navigating a complicated dynamic with their friend group and who might benefit from this story. Reflection to take with you. The trust you build with a group of people is not divided equally among all the group's members. Each relationship within the group has its own level and its own history. What you feel you have with the group as a whole may not correspond to what each person individually chooses to do with that trust. That is not a reason not to trust groups. It is a reason to be honest about who you trust with what.